Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Tremaine, world-traveling 80-year-old and writer of The Destination Is Now. This is my first interview with someone I have met in my travels. Today, we're talking with author Beatrix Flatt. I graduated from West Aurora High School in 1961. The Berlin Wall was built that year. By that time, the Iron Curtain between the Soviet Union and Europe had existed for over 15 years. The threat of nuclear war was palpable. I remember thinking that one wrong decision, a hawkish rogue in either side's military, or some technological glitch could destroy us all in an instant. That fear was constantly in the background. The Iron Curtain divided East Germany, part of the Soviet Union, from West Germany, an independent free nation. That curtain was not a curtain at all, but a fence with watchtowers and metal mesh made to cut fingers when anyone attempted to stick them through that mesh to climb it. There were sensors to detect those who tried to leave the Soviet Union, and landmines, guards with handguns, the Russian version of AK-47s to deter attempts at crossing the open area on the East German side. There was a 1,640-foot wide protective zone, strictly controlled, and an additional 3.1-mile restricted zone on the east side. Houses, trees, whatever might provide a place to hide were removed from the 1,400 kilometers of the divide. There were many hundreds of dogs to discover the track and track down would-be escapees. I remember hearing about people's movements being monitored and restricted. Now that I have been here, staying with Lorenz and Trixie for a month in an area of Germany where villages and towns, families and communities separated from one another, I have at least caught a glimpse of the trauma people endured for 40 years. Lorenz grew up in Helmstedt, just 2 or 3 kilometers from the fence with all its armaments and fortifications. Trixie has hiked the entire length in Germany of where the wall stood, and she interviewed people who lived on both sides. She has written a book with pictures of people and places and some of the stories she heard. The book is titled Grenzenlos, Begegnungen am grünen Band. She and others would like the former symbol of separation and hostility to become a symbol of community, life together without borders. For more information, Trixie's website is linked in the show notes. I click on the option to translate the site to English. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Trixie, I am so glad to see you again. That's it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. You treated me so well. It was wonderful when I visited.
We miss you so much.
See, yes. Well, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed becoming immersed in your setting and your world in Helmstedt, you and Lawrence. And I was so fascinated from when I first saw the book that you wrote about your adventure on that 1,400 kilometers. And I don't even understand why exactly I was so taken with it, but the whole idea of being at a border that was so divisive and interviewing people and whatever. So I guess that's the reason that I wanted to do this interview. And my first question is, how did this happen? How did you come to decide you were going to take a backpack and hike for 1,400 kilometers? Yeah.
Perhaps I have tell a little bit about my background. I grew up in South Germany, and I came to Helmstedt next to the former border in '93, when there was no border anymore. My husband Lorenz grew up in Helmstedt, so he knows the situation, how it was until the political turnaround. And I came here to Helmstedt in 1993, so 4 years after the border opens. So we did a lot of hikes and weekend short traveling to the former East, because it's only 3 kilometers from Helmstedt. And we always passed this border, and we also hiked for a couple of meters or kilometers on this patrol road. In German, we call it Kolonnenweg. And this road is all along the former border, and the former border was 1,400 kilometers. And I remember always standing on this former petrol road, and so surprised and curious and amazed that this path is going 1,400 kilometers all over Germany.
That was so fascinating to see, by the way, to stand on those 2 tracks that the trucks went on, and to see sometimes just almost pristine forests around that, and it was like being in a tunnel on almost in these places.
Yeah, and I said, oh, if I have one day, I will have 2 months or 3 month time, and then I will go all this way. Okay. And how it happens in life, family, job, and all the things, you never have 2 or 3 months time. So I always had the idea, one day. Yes, and then it came the year 2019. So 30 years of the political turnaround, the border opening, and 30 years of the Green Belt. And then I decided I have to go this year, 30 years Green Belt. Yes, and then I had the plan in the beginning of the year, looked at my diary, blocked all the weeks I will have time. And I decided not just to walk, because I'm a journalist, and I decided to combine this because I'm curious. I wanted to talk to the people who is living there, who is working there. What are the people thinking in the west side, on the east side, and so on. So I did a lot of research to find interview partners, and I started to plan it, because
that must have been a difficult task to find all the people and plan in advance who you would meet, but you needed to do that.
It took me half a year. It was hard work. It took me half a year, because you can't do it and meet people by chance, because it's so remote, it's so lonely, you won't meet people. And if there's a house next to the border, people perhaps are not at home and for work and so on. So I tried to find interesting people. That was not so difficult. It was a lot of work, but it was okay. And then you have to organize everything, to walk, to meet the people, to write, to find a place to sleep, and all these things. Yeah, but it worked. And when I started I walked from south to north. So I started in the triangle Czech Republic, Saxony, and Bavaria, and walked north to the Baltic Sea. And when I started, and you have 14,000 kilometers to hike, I didn't know whether I could cope with the situation. I had no idea. I have never done before.
Yeah.
But yes, I walked 20, sometimes 25 kilometers, and then I had 100, 200. And I thought, okay, if you can walk 500 or 700 kilometers, you can also do 1,400 kilometers.
Well, I'm curious, did you have in your mind some kind of, this is why I want to do this?
No,
Here's
just
what I
curious.
remember.
I just was curious.
Just curious. Interesting.
Yeah, just curious. And I had lots of questions, and I wanted to meet very different people. So I didn't want to focus only on the history.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, I don't know the English word. We call it in German Zeitzeuge. So people who lived during the time of the border of the divided Germany. What is the English word? Witness?
Yes, personal witness.
Yeah. So I didn't
the first person, you want to talk to people who experienced it.
Yeah, but I didn't want to meet only these witness.
Okay.
I also wanted to meet people who live there. What reason? I don't know, but who live there, who moved there, who are still there, and so on, who started something new in this area. So very, very different. That was my plan.
Yeah. That is interesting, because it is a different approach that you wanted to feel kind of how it feels for them now in that historic setting. Not just what is the history of it, but how do you feel?
And why? What is the reason that you live here? Did you live all the time here? Did you move there? Because there are also people who moved there. They especially looked for this place, for this remote place, and this interesting landscape, and moved in this area. So
did they tell you why? Some of them, I mean,
yeah, of course. Some come for the nature. Okay. Some come for the combination of nature and history.
Okay. Oh,
so perhaps I have to explain a little bit what green belt means.
Please.
So green belt is the along the former Iron Curtain. So the Iron Curtain divided Europe during the Cold War. And there's also an Iron Curtain in Germany, the former border. And people already in the 80s, 1980s, when the border still exists, they discovered birds which were disappeared elsewhere. So they only lived there, these birds. So they realized this is a special nature area which has to be protected. And already in 1989, so a couple of weeks after the wall came down, they had a huge meeting of nature. How you call them?
Environmentalists.
The nature.
Yeah.
And they decided we have to protect this stripe of land. And they used the first time the expression green belt, because it's a stripe all along Germany, and they called it green belt, grünes Band. So the idea was born, and they were very active, and so the green belt survived. And now it's the biggest chain of nature area in Germany. Yeah. So and the thing is that it was a death zone, death stripe in Germany, because lots of people died there, and the border fortification was so I have no adjective in the moment, so strong that the reason was that people could not move from the GDR to the west. So if they tried to escape, they either died or went to prison. Some were successful and could flee to West Germany, but not a lot of people were successful. Mm. So it was like a prison. The east part, the politicians of the east part always said, we have to protect our people from the capitalist West. So that's the reason that they did the border. But if you have seen the leftovers, the remains of the border, so it was not to protect them. So people died there and suffered from this border.
People weren't shot trying to get into East Germany.
Nobody wanted to get in East Germany, yeah. And the thing was, from the west side, they could go next to the border, but from the east side, there was a 5-kilometer area where nobody could go in, only the people who lived there. So nobody from the east side have ever seen the border, only from the west side. And from the west side, there was a kind of tourism. So people at the weekend went to the border. They built towers at the west side, not to protect or to watch, but to get a look inside to East Germany.
Well, I remember Lawrence talking about his family going there.
Yeah, and there were bus loads coming. There were restaurants next to the borders because people came all over Germany to see it. And the reaction of the West was that they built the walls where the villages were very close to it, so that there was even no contact with the eyes. And people from the east side, if they had eye contact or could see people from the west, they were not allowed to wave. No reaction.
Tell me that story. I remember you talked to somebody.
That's a story I only other people told me. There was a funeral in the west side, and the cemetery was next to the border. And the relatives from the west side weren't allowed to come to the funeral. So they were sitting perhaps on a hill, hearing the bells ringing from the funeral, and now it took place, the funeral. And a person from the west tried to wave because he knew his relatives will be there at the funeral. And the next day, one person of the Stasi was the state security, came to him and asked, "What have you done? Why did you wave to the west?" And he said, "No, I didn't wave. The sun was too strong and I had to hold my hand in front of the eyes." So he was creative and nothing happened, but other people get frightened and suffered from this situations like this. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I remember, especially when we were in what is it? It was the
Hüttensleben, yeah.
Area. Looking down, I don't know if that was where it was or another place, looking down kind of in the trench, the dip that went down from the border and then up to a village. And there was a place where kind of the fences in back of the houses, I don't know if they were there at that time, but I imagined dogs chasing people trapped in that area, and the possibility of being shot. There was an eerie sense, an eerie feel to it.
Yeah, and that was really horrible. And the people from the east who tried to flee, they didn't know the system. So there were several fences, and the first fence, perhaps nothing happened, and they didn't know what comes next. But the first fence had special metal to make an alarm. So the people who wanted to flee thought, "Oh, we were successful. We made the fence, and then they went on. And then there were alarm, and all the police and the border security was there, and yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's really a horrible system. And they also had lights, especially when the villages were close to the border. They had, it was daylight, night and day. So people also were suffering from this. It was always stress for them to live there. If there were small villages with only a few houses, people were forced to move. So they had to leave their houses, and they removed the houses and the villages, because the villages were always difficult to control, because the villages were the only place which saw the border. So they moved the villages. So there are a lot of places along this green belt where they are signed, here is the village, or here was the village. Here lived the people, here lived these families, and they had to leave this village in hours. Sometimes there came a lorry, and they had 1 hour, and they had to go on the lorry, and they drove them very east in a complete different area, and they had to live there. This happened quite often. And they had horrible names for this. One name was Aktion Ungeziefer. Ungeziefer, what could be the English word? Animals you don't want to have, like rats or bugs.
Oh, yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah.
I
And
can't
this
think of
was
the word
the
either,
horrible name of this action. So
Yeah.
the people were treated like Ungeziefer, and they had to go.
Yeah, I'm
This
thinking of
is
the English.
the picture of humans they had.
Yeah, it's like they were exterminating, is an English word for, like, when you want to get rid of rats, you exterminate them. You want to get the bugs or whatever, you get rid of them.
Yeah. Yeah, but on the other side, there's the nature. And this is the special thing on the Green Belt. It's not only a nature trail for hiking, it's also an historic trail, and it's a memorial landscape.
Okay.
And you can't do the Green Belt just for hiking, because you always see the remains of the fortification of the former border. You have signs, here died a person while fleeing. This happens. This villages had to remove. The people had to go, and there was a cemetery, and they were not allowed to go to the cemetery anymore. And so many awful stories. So it's really the combination which makes the special of hiking the Green Belt.
Oh, I suppose, yeah. And well, of course, I guess there aren't all that many left, but there were the towers there, that the machine guns and the AK-47s were with the border patrol people at the top of that, and
they had the fences, and they had special metal things which stopped cars, and then they had this
well, there's the
earth where nothing could grow, that you see the footsteps. There was a 10 meters type, especially in the areas where villages had been, not everywhere. There were no plants, and it was always plain earth, and you would see if somebody you would see the footprints. So it was a system, and it was got always stronger. They developed it. They started at the beginning of 60s. So the Berlin Wall was built 61. And at the same time, they started the border fortification and made it always stronger and heavier.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. That's the year I graduated from high school. as an 18-year-old.
Yeah,
I remember that. And one of the things that I remember when we went to the museum in Helmstedt. No, yeah. And the spring guns. Sometimes the triggering thing or something would make these. They were like mortars or mines that when they went off, they would have like metal shrapnel and whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, I just read something earlier that they would pretty much really damage anyone within 100 meters. And it could go as far as 500 meters. And so it was
so they removed them. I don't know exactly in the moment, the year, I think in the beginning of the 80s, when the East politics in Germany changed a little bit, and they had contact to the GDR politicians, and so then they removed them.
Okay. Because that was like the
but still there was enough. And it was difficult.
Well, what I'm curious again about curious about some of the stories that people told you along the line of their experience during the time when the wall was up. Are there any that stick in your mind?
Of the stories?
Yeah.
So I told you that I not only collected historical stories, also from the presence, and that's the special thing of the book. It's a mixture of and a variety of stories, and there are some about nature conservation. It started, for example, with a project in the triangle just at the beginning of the German Green Belt, at the triangle Czech Republic, Saxony, and Bavaria. They have a breeding station for river pearl mussels, because river pearl mussels are very are necessary for the rivers to keep them clean, and and they are a good sign for good nature. If they are still mussels, the river is okay, but our rivers are not okay. Even in this remote area. So the mussels have problems to survive. So especially in the first years, though they have a breeding station, and it's a joint project between Czech Republic and Germany. And this, it's very impressive. They do it for years to have all these mussels for a couple of years, and then they try to put it in the river and hope they will survive, that the qualities of the river are good enough. So I like this project very much because scientists from Czech Republic and Germany work there, and they only could do it in this remote area because otherwise they would probably steal the mussels and destroy the mussel banks. And so I like this story very much.
Well,
and another thing is I met a man. The story I had the title a hippie in the GDR, because it was not, hippies were not it wasn't supposed to be a hippie in the GDR. That was
no, I would think not.
What was West rubbish and capitalist, but he wanted to be a hippie. And he had long hair, and he had relatives in the west part of Germany. So he get textile fabrics from the west, and his mother made clothes for him like the hippies.
Oh, really?
With flowers and special jeans with white legs.
Bell bottoms.
But his problem was he was living next to the border. I don't know, 100 meters to the border. He had a wall in this village, like in Högensleben, so he couldn't look to the other side. And he had friends who want to flee. He didn't want to flee, but he told the friends, where's the border? Where's the fence? You should go there. So, and the two friends were discovered, and he discovered him, and he had to go to prison. He was, I don't know, 15 or 16. He was a young man. He had to go for a month in prison because he tried to help these people. And from this time on, the Stasi, the state security, watched him all the time. And they knew what girlfriends he had. When he finished this friendship with the girlfriends, where he went dancing, what he told other people, and so on. So he was always controlled by the Stasi. And he was afraid to have a look in the Stasi documents. But after years, because he was always afraid, which friends told something about me, and you never knew whether your friend was a member of the Stasi and told them anything. And if you 40 years later perhaps get to know that your best friend was a Stasi member, that's a horrible experience. But he did it, and he showed me his folder with all the Stasi documents, and this was a very impressive story. And he only wanted to be a hippie, and he wanted to hear nice music, and and in the Stasi documents he could read, he only looked West TV and listened to horrible West music and had long hair and so on. So that was what the Stasi wrote about.
And they would have to find that out from somebody in his close
people who were close to him.
The only way they would...
he was lucky that they was not the best friends of him.
Okay. That would be something.
And then there was a story very far in the north. It's a woman. She always wanted to be an artist. She wanted to paint, but she had no possibility because she had to earn money, and she had to help her parents, and she had a big house and big family. So she worked always in the agriculture and the LPG, that were these the state-owned farms. There were no private agriculture in the GDR, only state-owned farms. So she worked there, and then she had the possibility to do some courses for painting, and started to paint in the evenings after her work on the farm. And she's a very sensitive person, and she felt all the injustice and the system of the border and the prison. So she had very dark pictures, and the Stasi saw the pictures and said to came and visit her. Only crazy people visit. Only crazy people are painting like this. And so she was frightened that they will forbid her to paint, or should they had to go to prison or in a hospital for crazy people. Everything could happen. But she was lucky that she could stay at home. And she always painted in her home and could show nobody her picture.
Oh, wow.
And after the political change, she could show the pictures. And she has lots of pictures. Very dark, very sad pictures, because she felt like this. So there are lots of stories.
I can imagine. Well, a couple variety of things running through my mind. That one is that I didn't really realize how structured the agricultural system was. That people on the east side, it was strict communism. They couldn't own the land.
No,
Right.
they all had
Northern-
to they all had to give their land in, it's called LPG.
Okay.
It's I think you can compare it in the Soviet Union it was called kolchose. I don't know the English word.
Okay.
Should be similar, but everything was state owned.
Okay.
And so people had to work for the state in these huge agricultural farms, but because they had no interest of making money, because they couldn't make money, so the situation in the GDR with food was always difficult. So they had enough food, they didn't have to starve, but they had the quality of the food was not very good and the variety was not very good. Yeah, and they only had their own food, what they could produce, though they had no fruits from South Europe, so like oranges or bananas or whatever. So they had the cabbage, the potatoes, and these things which grew in the GDR.
Yeah.
So
Could they grow, yeah. Could they grow any of their own food then?
Yeah, they did it. Everybody who has a little bit garden, they grew their own. And there are numbers that the harvest in the private gardens of vegetables, I don't know whether it was more, but it was very important for the nutrition of the people, because they did it probably in their own gardens because they wanted to have their own vegetables. Yeah, but in the shops, it was very difficult. And they always had to queue. If you tell people, if you talk to people, they tell you about queues. Sometimes they didn't know what they sell, but there's a queue, should be something interesting.
That's funny. Yeah.
And there was also a big thing. People from the West who had relatives in the East, they sent parcels for Christmas with special things they couldn't buy. So coffee was very popular, and things to make cake like almonds, and I don't know what else, but especially coffee, I think, was very popular because it was. They have no own coffee in the GDR, so they couldn't grow it. You have to buy it on the world market, and because the East market was so had no value, they couldn't buy it. Only special people. There were shops in the GDR. That's what they called inter-shops. There you could buy things from the West, but you had to pay also with West money, and it was not allowed to have West money, so it was difficult system.
Impossible,
yeah.
Well, I'm interested in pursuing a little bit the organization that is working now on shifting the green belt from a symbol of death to a symbol of life, I guess, and regeneration, because there are plants and I imagine little animals too, and you said birds that are not everywhere else, because that along the green belt, it was just naturally protected because there aren't too many people who live then in that area. Are there inside the green belt, and can people build factories on the green belt?
No, so it was always a remote area, because from the east side you were not allowed to go there, and from the west side there was not much interest. Also this border tourism I told you, but not factories, because it was the end of the world, because you couldn't go there. And if you build a factory or if you have a shop or something like this, you always try that you have a circle with your customers around you. So nobody. So it was in a remote area also on the west side. That's the reason that that these animals and plants could survive there.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's protected, so you can't build directly in the green belt. In the beginning, so 89, 90, or in the beginning of the 90s, when it started, they destroyed also some areas of the green belt because they built streets. There were no streets, or less streets, between west and east and east and west. So we got new streets, new autobahn, new train things, and also farmers in the areas where there's good soil, they just took the land and planted crops and so on. So the green belt is destroyed in some areas, but it's not possible to build there anymore. So now it's protected. And they also tried, the organization which is looking after the green belt is it's called Bund, B-U-N-D, Bund Naturschutz Deutschland. It's a German organization for environment and nature protection. And they try to close these, where it's destroyed, to that that the nature can get it back. If there's a street, the street will remain. But if there's agriculture, intensive agriculture, probably they have a chance to buy the land, and the farmer can get other land, and then they can put it to the nature protection too. But there's a lot of work to do still, and to protect it. And it's not only the Organization for Environment who protects it. Meanwhile, also the state is protecting it. So there are 9 states, federal states. No, not federal states. How we call it? Niedersachsen, Lower Saxonia.
Like the states in the U.S.
Yeah. So the states. There are 9 states. Connecting the green belt, and they all look after this area. Try to protect it. And meanwhile, they try that the green belt will be a World Heritage area as well. It's not already done, but there are 9 federal states, is correct. That's the comment. So at the World Heritage.
One of the things that intrigued me that both you and Lawrence talked about is that just by virtue of announce the reunification happening in the 89 or in the whenever it was exactly, it's unrealistic to think that you can simply make everybody come together and be okay. And some of the challenges of kind of, coming back together with each other. I mean, I heard sometimes, and I even had a conversation with somebody about the difference in the 40 years made in how people feel and react with one another, and their attitudes and understandings of things. And what are your observations about that challenge?
That is a very difficult topic, and the German people are not finished this discussion. But in 89, everybody, when the border came down, everybody was surprised, happy, excited, whatever. And then there was one group in the GDR, especially these people who started the demonstrations on the streets in 89. They wanted to discuss how a new GDR could be.
Separate
and then
from
there was then there was this huge group of people. They saw the wealth and the standard of living in the West and the money, and they wanted the money now. And the problem was lots of people, the border was open, and lots of people from the GDR went to the West because there was no border anymore, and started a life there with work, with standard of living, with better schools, with better train stations, and so on. And so the politicians decided, if it was correct or not. I try to express myself objective. I don't know whether it's possible, but I try to.
That's right. Yeah.
So the politicians decided, we need the reunification very quick, otherwise nobody or less people will stay in the east part. They all will go to the West. And this was one of, and the other thing was the political, the world politics, because there was this open window with the Soviet Union.
Oh, yeah.
And they had to accept a reunification. And that this time it was Gorbachev.
Okay.
And we know the history, what came afterwards.
Right.
So it was a very short window for this. So, yeah, the reunification happened in 1990. So less than 1 year after the wall came down. And at this time, lots of people, or not everybody, lots of people thought the West system is the better system. And we have to bring the West system to the whole Germany. And in this moment, or it started in this moment, that the people in the West felt their life, what they have done for 40 years, what they have achieved was nothing. And then came the economy. So all the factories were not very efficient.
In the East.
In the East. So they closed lots of factories. And people who worked there for years or decades had no job. And it took years until new factories came. It starts now that they
in the East
try to bring new factories.
Yeah.
So lots of people were unemployed, had no money, and they got the money from the state, money if you are unemployed. But they never had the chance for a new job, especially the generation perhaps 40 plus or 50 plus. The younger people had new possibilities, and they went to the West, lots of them. And the olds stayed there unemployed, disappointed, and so on. And this process was very hard. And I think the west part of Germany didn't expect that these bad feelings stay so long and stay even in the next generation. So even young people, kids from this disappointed generation have these disappointed, I call it, I don't know whether it's politically correct, it's really a difficult subject, these East disappointment. And they are not don't have the same value than the people in the West.
Right. Oh yes, this is an old story.
Yeah, and there's we always have statistics, and they count the persons in leading positions, and we have not a lot of leaders in huge companies or in the government and so on. from the East after 30 years.
After 30 years, yeah.
Yeah. And that's a difficult, really difficult topic, how this could change. And then is the other thing, if you have, I don't know the English word in the moment, the money you earn during your life, and then you have a house. What do you call this altogether?
Equity. It's what you.
Okay.
Yeah,
so they don't have the chance of equity.
Yeah, building equity.
Building equity because they couldn't do it during the GDR.
And
the last 30 years were more difficult to build it because it how could they afford a house and all these things. So the money is still in the West.
Okay. It's interesting that I mean, as I said, it's kind of an old story of people trying to gain a sense of worthiness and identity, and the circumstances seem to put them in a as lesser in some way, and so I can understand why it's so difficult to talk about that.
Yeah, and their life changed from one day to the other.
Yeah.
The rule for 40 years changed from one day to the other.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons that I when you were talking about the working together for the muscles, that having people coming together to accomplish things, building relationships again, and I'm wondering if there are things you have seen along the way that seem to be helpful in building relationships with the East and the West, because in the East that was 40 years, and so it impacted their whole sense of what things are about. But I'm thinking in terms of all the challenges the world has now, trying to get people who are opposed to each other together. But if that organization with the muscles, that was some people from different places who came together, got to know each other, and had a common goal. And are there things like that happening along the Greenbelt, or at which you're aware?
I think after the border opens, there was a lot of cooperation, and all organizations tried to meet people from the other side of the border, and there were a lot of we traveled always to the east part, and the people from the west came from the east came to the west in the beginning for shopping and then for working. And there were also families, so the border divided families, and they visited each other, which haven't seen for years. Sometimes you could visit your relatives on the other side, but never the whole family. If the people from the east side wanted to visit the family in the west, always one person had to stay at home so that they are sure that they come back. Perhaps a couple could go and had to leave their children, or the children could go and had to leave their parents, whatever. There was a lot of cooperation and connection and so on, and the people are looking what's best for them. So if the doctor on the other side of the border is closer with the new street, you go there and don't ask, is it on the east or on the west? So normally I try to avoid now the word east and west. Today I use it quite often to make it
I understand.
Make it easier. Normally I say I go to Magdeburg or to Saxony, and I don't say I go to the east. There are still people who say this, and but I try to avoid it. Well,
I remember one of the times we were driving around, it was just comical. You would say, now we're in what was east. And then in 5 minutes, we were in, that was in west, on the west side. And then and that, I mean, it was clear, it's clearly helpful to lose that way of identifying who people are, that this this is the East.
And the younger generation doesn't ask whether it's East or West. They go to Munich, they go to Dresden, they go to which city ever, and don't ask for this.
It is frustrating. It's frustrating how long it takes.
And I think nobody expected that it takes so long, but we had no it happened never before, so nobody knew what will happen. But the interesting thing is that Korea is very interested in the Green Belt. So Korea is divided in North and South Korea.
Oh, of course.
Pardon?
I just said, of course, that.
And there are regularly visitors from Korea coming to the Green Belt and looking how it's managed here. And they already have plans how they would do a Green Belt.
Really?
Because it's very different to the German Green Belt because it's not so long. I don't know the numbers. It's not so long, but it's much wider. So it's very, and they could make paths in the Green Belt because it's not only a small stripe, it's very wide. But they come regularly. To get to know this.
Are there some things that they have talked about that they've seen that have been happening between the East and West after the reunification? Are there things that they have seen that are effective?
In the Korean people here in West in Germany, or what do you mean?
Well, what I mean is, are there things they have noticed that have happened that have been helpful in bringing East and West together in Germany that they're seeing and going to take back to Korea?
I don't know whether they are thinking about the people, how they come together, but I know that they want to preserve these, I don't know whether they call it Green Belt, but this border area also as a nature protection and as a historical memorial.
Well, of course, when I talk about you and what you've been doing, I tend to frame it as seeking to take something, as I said earlier, it was a sign of death and division, to a symbol of community and freedom and working together and healing.
It's a symbol of freedom, and it's a symbol what people can achieve if they believe in something. Nobody knew and expected that this border will come down one day, and it happened. But the thing is that there are more borders in the world than in the beginning of 90s when this border came down.
Isn't that part is exceedingly frustrating to all of us, that and at my age, having been through born during World War II, and then the little window of less fighting, although the Korean War was there, and then Vietnam and whatever else. But through my early years, there was a sense of hope that we were progressing, that we were healing issues, the racial issues, whatever they might be. And so it is frustrating to be at a time when divisions are so distinct and in so many places. That's one of the reasons that I think I have been interested in what you've focused on, because whether you chose to do it or not, I mean, that's precisely what the center of what you've been doing and talking about, is providing us ways of healing where there have been divides. And that's why I keep poking around about what, things like the muscles and working together on that. I mean, anything that actually accomplishes
Yeah.
reunification, really, between people who are divided. Well, I sure appreciate your openness and your willingness to do this. And it's interesting. I was with you all for that month, and then I was for a month in Westerwald in Germany, and around people who were always speaking German, and I wanted to be that, and I liked that very much. And I appreciate the challenge of talking about complex things in a language that is not your first language, in your heart language. So
yeah, and there are so many special words I never used. It's not just a daily conversation.
And I understand that. Well, again, it was such a joy to be with you and Lawrence, and getting to go around these places and hear the stories of each place, and to feel the history in that place that is still alive and well. It's present, it's palpable. And it's so easy to just pretend that the history's gone and it's over without addressing it and recognizing the stories, people's stories, and what those older people remember. And can't just change because somebody said you are now reunified. So thank you so much. And,
thank you very much. It was quite interesting.
and there's more to cover in the future, because I'm again fascinated with
and
the
you're
curiosity
most
of
welcome to Helmstedt again anytime.
All right. Well, thank you.